My guest today is Fran Sands, an amateur boxing coach and mentor to kids and teens in Northeast England. His involvement in amateur boxing began in 1978 when, at the age of 6, he entered his first boxing gym. Over the next 13 years, he competed in 60 amateur contests, winning regional titles, reaching national semifinals and finals, and representing England at under 19 level. At the age of 23, Fran moved into a coaching role. Our conversation became deep at times as it flowed in and out of topics from boxing instruction to mentoring the youth, to strategies and tactics in competition, and how being part of a boxing family and an amateur boxing club impacts lives. I found Fran Sands to be smart, thoughtful, and even soulful in his approach and outlook, and I quite enjoyed our conversation, and I hope you will too. Welcome to the Transformations Podcast. Here, guests and I will share our transformative experiences and will explore how to find excellence in life. Well, I'm thrilled to meet you. I saw some of your videos and then by chance got the introduction to you. It was kind of a backward thing. You know,
serendipity, I think they call that, don't they?
I had already been watching your videos, and I was like, wow, this guy's really doing good things for the neighborhood, for the people.
Mm-hmm.
He's got good skill, good presentation, very good way of speaking and explaining. Yeah, I'll have to reach out to him sometime, and then all of a sudden, boom, there it was.
Yeah, it's very kind of you to say all that. It's yeah, I mean, as you're a martial arts background, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it kind of
and boxing
and boxing as well. Yeah,
but
kind of seeps into sort of every aspect of your life, doesn't it? Kind of, you know, there's lessons there for everything, I suppose. Yeah, so it's something that continues to be a massive part of my life and has been since I was 6 years old. So talking boxing and being around boxing, and particularly amateur boxing, you know, I love being in the boxing club, and I love talking the skills and all of the emotions and everything that comes with it. You know, fanatical on professional boxing when I was a youngster, but you know, that's somewhat cooled. There's certain fights I'll cross the street to watch, but unfortunately, I don't know, I wouldn't call it falling out of love with professional boxing, but an old saying, you know, if certain fights, if they were happening in my back garden, I'd draw the curtains, you know. I think sometimes the hype is not at all matched by the actual event.
By the skill, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the world we live in. It's something really interesting. Was when the recent Terence Crawford, Errol Spence fight was on, and that was like the first fight in a long time that I had real interest in, and it caused me to look back over time, and I found it remarkable that, you know, when Sugar Ray Leonard fought Thomas Hearns in their first fight, I think back in '81, I think Ray Leonard was like 25 and Thomas Hearns was about to turn 23. Yet by the time these two guys have fought each other in modern day, one of them's 36 and the other one's 33. And I think, well, Ray Leonard and Tommy Hearns they just wanted to meet and work out who's the best, you know, who's in charge here. And unfortunately, I think kind of the marketing seems to have got ahead of the sport itself. And I think that will make the sport suffer in the long run, unfortunately. But there you go. That's just one of my little sort of odd observations.
I just remember all the excitement around Hagler Hearns, Leonard Hagler, you know, and the three of them you know, Roberto.
Those fights sold themselves, didn't they? They sold themselves,
you know.
Yeah.
You can't. Top fighters, no internet marketing,
nope.
just the power of their skill and their personality and their sportsmanship, and wow.
Yeah, I mean,
It's all
I
marketing,
kept, yeah,
branding.
exactly. I kept scrapbooks from when I was boxing myself as a kid, and not only that, they've become quite a historical sort of um, useful artifact, because I also used to keep cuttings of the big fights, and you know, Hagler Hearns, Duran, Hagler Leonard. These fights would make the back pages of the of the sports pages of the major newspapers over here. Now you just don't. Boxing gets 7 or 8 pages from the back, and you'll get a couple of inches. Back then, it was the whole back page. That's how big boxing was then, and now it's periodic, and now it's we get treated to a so-called event, I prefer to call it now, of sort of Tyson Fury against Ngannou, and I don't like criticising fighters, because it's not something I like to do, but I think something's got lost along the way, and I can't quite put my finger on it. When I'm in the boxing club with the kids, that's real, raw, sort of enjoyable truth. And when I do my online stuff, it's all about the learning and helping people just who all have different journeys. A vast majority of people who work online, I suppose, kind of are interested in the stuff I do for fitness and for growth and for well-being and all of that stuff. They're not necessarily competitors. In fact, most are not, because competitors have a coach. Competitors are in a boxing gym and they're getting looked after and they're getting trained. There are plenty of people who simply don't have access to that type of resource, and that's where I think, you talked about internet and internet marketing. I think that's where, the ability to disseminate understanding and information and insight is fantastic.
Do you think that more people youngsters aren't getting into boxing because maybe in decades past it was a way out of the neighborhood? It was a way to lift themselves up by the bootstraps if they weren't doing good in school, or didn't want to be a farmer. I'm just making generalizations, but now with YouTube and the internet and TikTok, everybody's their own brand, and they can make money on their phone and find a way that
It's a great point. I mean, I suppose every area is different. The area I'm in, for example, is probably somewhat different than maybe West Baltimore, where sort of Tank Davis is raised, or in the outskirts of Mexico City, or wherever it might be. Those areas, have immense challenges. We are in our boxing club is in a tough area. I think from the our boxing club is in relatively speaking a poorer neighbourhood, but there's poor and there's poor. So I think for many kids in genuine sort of where there's relative poverty where I am, in the neighbourhood where our boxing club is, it's not poverty like, for example, Pacquiao faced when he was growing up in the Philippines. Sure. So those kids, the idea of them having, phones and the ability to do that is probably different. But certainly in a neighbourhood like ours, I think the kids just have so many other options that don't necessarily challenge them. And there's lots of temptations, and something we always say, and it's something my wife says about what we do in our boxing club. We want kids to join our boxing club. We want them to join our tribe before they get the temptations to join other tribes that maybe are not interested in them, particularly more interested in how they can help, help, in inverted commas, take advantage or use you for ends that are not going to be in your long-term interest. So I think the range of options available for kids now are much greater, but they are not necessarily the best options for them. I think the number of sporting clubs in this area, the number of youth clubs in this area has gone down dramatically in the last 10, 15, 20 years. And I think if you don't, it's very easy to criticise young people, but I think we've all got a responsibility to try and make the neighbourhood special for them, or give them options that will actually challenge them and will help them longer term. We as adults can't just criticise. We have to get involved, and we have to try and do something for them without trying to sound too hippy dippy. I think it's just a reality.
Yeah, for sure. One thing about boxing clubs and like old school traditional martial art clubs, which you don't see as much today, is that it's kind of bare bones place. When I was a kid, I grew up in and around Philadelphia.
Okay.
Just
well,
as
the boxing city,
right.
city. Yeah.
We got Joe Frazier's gym and all kinds of good boxing gyms all over the place. And and in the karate schools as a kid and teenager, the members, the students, were responsible for cleaning. At the end of the night, someone would mop, someone would clean the windows, someone would wipe down the bags. So you're learning responsibility, you're learning to be, respect, you're learning to help keep a place organized and in order. And when you go in, you're one of a group. It's almost like going from, the regular world into a secret world, a sacred space where you are one among a history of boxers or martial artists or people taking part in this training of mind, body, and spirit and sweat. And as hard as you got hit, 7,000 people got hit just as hard in the same place, survived, got up, do it again. It forges the spirit, these kind of clubs,
I could not agree more. Yeah, I mean, look, we're very conscious about. So our boxing club, as I'm sure the one you took part in, although some clubs are pro-am and some of the coaching staff can maybe make a little bit of money on the side there, but ours is 100% voluntary. We go there and we give up our time, and boxing can be quite time consuming, especially if you've got kids in competition. As a bog standard amount of time, it's probably 6 or 8 hours a week at least of an evening. And this time of year, when you're getting into I've got 100 reasons to stay sat on the couch next to my wife with drinking tea and chatting and being in the nice warm environment. But you get up and you get out. And there's been some really interesting research as well done in Manchester in recent years about kids who get involved in boxing, and this is all around gang culture. And kids face massive peer pressure. We all know that as when we grew up, we didn't want to be seen as different or we wanted to fit in. But and when kids try and get involved in activities that maybe don't align to what the others around them may define as cool, they get a lot of peer pressure, and they will effectively be gradually hounded out. What are you going there for? Why would you go to football practice, or why would you go to rugby practice, or whatever it might be? They've done social research in Manchester, and they've established that actually boxing, these kids who have these gang affiliations are actively supported by other people in that gang to go to the boxing club. So there's a real positive sort of flywheel effect. Mm-hmm. And then we always say our kids they'll take the behaviours in our box. So they will always get pleased and they will always get thank you. Well, I have no idea for a lot of these kids. I have no idea what their life is outside of the boxing club. What I do know is the moment they walk through that door, they will get a consistent experience. They won't find me drunk and ratty and, intolerant of them, and we all have our off days. But They will always get pleased. They will always get thank you. I expect the same in return. And we will challenge them. We'll put an arm around the shoulder when we need to. We'll shut the door on them being able to quit or find the easy way out when we need to. So they know what they get. And they do all of that. And it costs them £5 a week for 3 nights, and that's it. You're talking less than £2 per session for an hour and a half or whatever it might be. So we'll provide all of the kit, and so there's no financial barrier to these kids being involved. And you're right, mate. These are special places steeped with tradition that are left alone, even though our boxing club is on a tough estate. Not once in my life there have I ever recalled it ever being attacked, ever being attempted break-ins, anything like that. It just doesn't happen. People know what it is, they know what it stands for, and it's an important community resource, and we continue to try and grow it, and we get money off the police to build stuff on it and other charities, and we put our time in, and we want it to be here in another 50 years, like it's been for the last 50 years. It's that tradition.
So that same club has been there for 50 years.
Yeah, 1976, a group of men from the local community. I think they got a little bit of insurance money and all bunched in together and self-built. I should do a walk around now because we've just done a lot of refurbishment. And yeah, we've just those guys put it together, and God knows how many kids have been through the door. It's just it's been going 50 years, and it will be going another 50 years. I've got no question, no doubt about that. The challenge is, getting a coaching team who can make the commitments. The more coaches you have, the better. If you've got 10 coaches, then on any given night, maybe 4 or 5 will be able to turn up. So, we've got a coach who's a firefighter. We've got coaches who are maintenance workers. We've got coaches who are heating engineers. And, family life and everything. So if it's down to 2 or 3 people, the pressure on them builds. So the more people you have involved in a voluntary enterprise like this, the better. You get the joyful aspect of being there as a coach, because we've all had terrible days in work, and there's been days when I've felt really miserable going to boxing club, and after 2 hours with a bunch of harem-scarum kids who are very straightforward and very direct, you come out of there feeling, you feel great about the last 2 hours,
Yeah.
Hugely positive.
Yeah. Each entrance into that gym for you and the kids is a transformative experience. So many things are working through and coming out the other side transformed every single day, a little bit, and a lot of it.
Yes, 100%. And it's something I'll always tell them, So I had 60 fights as a young boxer. My first 25 fights, I think I won 12. So I was win 1, lose 1, win 1, lose 2. And the last, so I was never what I would consider a naturally gifted boxer. But I was incredibly hard working, and the last 25 fights, I won 21 of them. And I had an England vest, I represented my country, and so I always use that sort of example to them, my own example. Don't worry about the fact that you may lose a fight here and there. It's not relevant. What matters is the long game and your ability to work and commit.
Yeah, for sure.
Hard work trumps everything, I think, hard work with the right guidance, because you can be as gifted as you want, but without that, that's an old cliche. Yeah. But without that hard work, then nothing else is going to come to fruition. Work ethic.
What is the name of the club and its location so people can find it if they're interested to visit the club or join the club or volunteer?
Yeah, so Sefton Amateur Boxing Club is in a place called Netherton, which is just on the outskirts of a town called Bootle, just to the north of Liverpool in northwest England. Yeah, and we're open sort of 3 nights a week. The work we're doing currently, I would like the gym to be open all day, every day, and be used as a genuine sort of community resource. But yeah, that's an aspiration that I hope to be able to fulfill one day fairly soon. If my boxing coach, if my online sort of stuff continues to grow and improve, that may be the vehicle that allows me to really commit fully and make the boxing club where what I want it to be, what my vision of it would be. But look, we are an amateur boxing club, like hundreds. I think there's probably about 1,000 amateur boxing clubs in the United Kingdom. Liverpool, the city I'm in, has a particularly high density of boxing clubs, so we're very fortunate. It's I don't know whether it's because it's a port city or what. We've just always had a high number of boxing clubs. And it's in your country, it's the equivalent of a US boxing registered amateur boxing club, Olympic style boxing we like to call it now. Yeah, so that's us. Yeah, so I'm always happy for visitors to call in and say hello, see what we do.
So you started in 1978 at 6 years old at this very club.
Yes.
And what was it that drew you to want to pursue boxing at that age, or were you put into it?
I was very much put into it. So my dad was raised in Bootle. So he was raised in post-war Bootle. Now Bootle suffered dreadfully during the Second World War. It was like 70% of the housing stock was damaged through bombing, and it was very poor sort of area. And he was from a big family. His dad died when he was 5, and so he grew up in sort of 1950s Bootle. And consequently, his view was that you have to be able to look after yourself, and it's non-negotiable. You have to be able to handle yourself. You get in trouble, you can call upon skills and help out. And he took us there. He took me and my brother there, and kind of that was it, and kept us going. And don't get me wrong, there were periods during my sort of early teens when I may have given up if he wasn't the one forcing us to go. And that's what it was. It's like, no, you are going that boxing club. You are not, And I'm really glad that I got through that. So I have this sort of consternation. I don't like kids, because I've had kids come into our boxing club where they're being forced to go there, and I'm having to sit there with them where they're sobbing, crying. You don't want to be there. And I say to the parents, look, I'm all for like, pushing them and making them come, but look, this kid genuinely doesn't want to be in here. But I've never got to that point, but I'm really glad I got through that period of not wanting to be there, because the best was yet to come. And I had some wonderful years as a competitive boxer. It was just fantastic, the places I went to see and the other kids I met, both from the area and from beyond. So yeah, I was really glad that my dad forced us to go through that period, because it paid off in the long run. What
was it that transpired? Where was that shift in you that went from the I don't want to go to I really love it? There had to have been a moment or a period where something really changed inside.
Yeah, I think it was. So I coach alongside one of the guys who I used to box. He was a couple of years older than me, John Jones, and John started having some real success, and I just saw it, and it just clicked, and I think what people don't realise in a boxing club as well, or in any sport, I think, whilst I can do lots of coaching, actually there's a huge amount of learning going on between peers. So one kid will watch what another kid's doing and try to emulate. Mm-hmm. So actually, this is why I'm a big fan of having elite boxers train alongside novice boxers. so that they can see the effort that goes in and they can see patterns. And I think that was it. I think that, because don't get me wrong, fights were very difficult for me. Emotionally, they were tough. It was tough. I found the run up to a fight difficult, and I was definitely not in the fearless category. Absolutely not. But the actual joy of winning the bout, and more the joy the next morning when you wake up, and however fit you are, there's nothing like a proper fight to make you stiff and sore and achy. But you get up the next morning and remember that you boxed last night and that you won. And the feeling of loss was grim, but that feeling of having won was just like you literally ride high for a day or two, and then it's back in that gym and back onto the next one. So I just found that process amazing.
Yeah. I'm saying especially when you've won a hard won fight.
Yeah.
Like a really hard fight. You survived and you won. Like you edged out. So every bruise, you're like, yeah, I survived that one. Oh, the neck hurts. Yeah, but I won.
But it's worth it. Everything's worth it. And I think that challenge, that process of challenging yourself, and I think that's seeped into my overall sort of character and my sort of, I suppose, tenacity. Joanne, my wife, often says, you just have this ability to this resilience to just keep going, and I think that has come from boxing. I think, be disciplined, do the learning, but most importantly, do the hard work when you least feel like it. So you act professional, even though and I think that's even paid off with my boxing coach. I've been doing it a very long time, but I'm still in there and still, making it work and still helping people all over the world, sort of thing. So yeah, you gain values from sporting endeavours when you're a kid, I think, or anything that they can do outside of the academic sphere, where they do stuff in other areas. It doesn't have to be boxing, but stuff that challenges them in any way, I think, is invaluable to kids, and stuff that will defeat them. Stuff that they'll get wrong, and they'll feel, that they've just not lived up to their own expectations, and that will help them more and more, and it'll really grow them as adults. That's a strong belief of mine, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I think echoing what you're saying, I think one of the greatest things that kids and teens can learn in a boxing gym or an old traditional martial art gym or some other similar place where they're being challenged is that the discipline and the fortitude to keep going when you're losing, to keep trying when you can't get it, when you feel like a loser, to overcome it, and to take those skills into life, because it teaches self-resilience, belief in yourself, boost the confidence. I mean, why turn to alcohol or drugs or other things because things just aren't right? You lose your job, but you have this resilience. You lost that fight, you trained hard, you won another fight.
Yeah.
You couldn't do the gymnastics routine and you didn't make it to the competition, but you did it for the next one and you made it. And you get this idea because it's repetitive, right? Because you're sparring in the gym with your sparring mates, and then you have the competitions. And so in all of that sparring, you're getting examples again and again and again of taking the punishment, giving the punishment, remaining calm in the storm, getting back up, try again, try again, try again. I think that's one of the most important things, that forging of the spirit that we get.
Yeah, the interesting phrase used there, remaining calm in the eye of the storm. I think that's a vital one, and something I always, that Michael Phelps always said, getting in that swimming pool at 5 a.m, day in, day out, you're constantly making deposits. You're making deposits all of the time.
Right.
And at some point, you're going to need to make a withdrawal. And that's what all of those deposits are for. That's what I say to the kids. I say, this stuff is not easy. If it was easy, I could go and stand outside the local ale house and grab any fella who comes out of there and start taking them on the pads. If this stuff was easy, anyone could do it. But you're not anyone. You know, you've made the decision to walk in here tonight. And therefore, that makes you different. That makes you special. And that means that you need to fulfill that, keep it going. Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah. How has boxing, since when you started in 1978, I mean, that's a long time, till today, and you've seen a lot of different things coming and going. How has the question is, has the route of the training changed or evolved, or is it still the same route, but you got maybe different equipment and digital things with timers or something? Or is it basically that same foundation is the same foundation, tried and true?
It's a really great question. I think so. There's always been a strength and conditioning component of boxing. I think boxing is a all-round fitness. So any fighting, so I believe, so humans have been fighting since the word go. Often their environment helped them be fit enough for the fight, but then training comes in and there are a few sports that demand as much as fighting sports. It pushes the body to the absolute limits, and on top of everything else, you're taking genuine physical damage. So there are, in certain sort of areas, certainly at the elite level, the Olympic level stuff, there will be more heavily science focused sort of work, where they'll take, measurements and they'll look at different attributes, and there'll be all kinds of stuff around nutrition and everything. So that's on a different sort of level. In our boxing club, so I'm talking about at the grassroots level, I've got a gym full of, on some nights, 30, 35, 40 kids, all training at the same time, young people, all different ages, ranges, capabilities. We may have 5 or 6 coaches if we're lucky. And only when one of those kids or 2 or 3 of those kids are coming up to a competition will we zero in on them and focus. So we have to create a general training environment. And that general training environment is the same type of general training environment that I did back in the 80s. It's built around your warm up, your shadow boxing, and then your technical drills, technical sparring, heavy bag work, normal sparring, and good strength and conditioning. So the core training session for me has stayed largely the same. But it's once you get up to elite level, I think it's significantly different. I think back in the 80s, I think probably, the Eastern Europeans always were a lot more into science. US boxing, which was just dripping with talent. I think computer scoring caused real problems with US boxing, but I think they're getting back now to producing the fantastic fighters that they did. I think computer scoring had played havoc, actually, with the style that US boxing is, which is about speed and volume and, overwhelming people with, whereas the Eastern European style or the European style was always about almost a fencing style where they could pop singles and doubles, and that lent itself very well to computer scoring. So there are certain things that have changed, but that core training session is what it is. You do the repetition, the drills, and then you make that work in sparring. That's not changed.
You have a lot of videos, quite a bit of videos on your channel, and I'm surprised that, look, boxing's got like 5 punches, right? Jab, cross, hook, uppercut, overhand, and variations therein, but you were able to parse out 100 videos, on five 5 punches, but then you're adding them with footwork, you're adding them with combination. There's all kinds of, but martial arts has thousands of techniques,
Uh-huh.
but people don't seem to get that same generally fighting intensity as boxers get. And part of it is the training is so different, but also there's so much to learn and memorize and do.
Okay.
Whereas
Yeah.
in boxing's really pared down to like essentials,
Hmm.
the essentials of that. And I find that with Western combat sports, boxing, fencing, wrestling, right? It's really pared down to the techniques that will serve you well in those encounters, those combative encounters in sport or real life. And because of that, I feel like the level of intensity and detail and training is more focused on the reality of it, right? Rather
Yes.
than the consumption of it.
Hmm.
I'm saying this as a martial artist.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, but and I think it's wonderful. But I get in my head really excited when I see you have so many videos on technical development and then tactical development, and the fitness, part of it, and just footwork, and 18 videos on how to throw a hook. I'm making up the numbers. Maybe there's 30, but you've really got it down to a scientific level of organization, of breakout and discussion. Can we talk a little bit about, can you talk a little bit about, please, how you kind of see the boxing framework in your head for teaching and explaining?
Okay. Another great question. Um, so I think I've broken boxing down. I did a part of one of my sort of systems that I use. I've broke boxing down. I think it's into 61 individual skills.
61
Everything from a jab, and these are just basic skills without subtle variations. So a jab, 3 types of hook with each hand to the head, 3 types of hook with each hand to the body, 3 types of uppercuts with each hand to the head, 3 types of uppercut to the body. It goes on, and you've got body movement, slips, rolls, foot movements, diagonals, all of that stuff. Now, what I tend to think is we still try and work in patterns. So the first 30 minutes when a new person comes into the boxing club, I will seek to teach them the fundamentals of a stance, the fundamentals of moving forwards and backwards, the fundamentals of throwing a single jab and doing a defence, which would be a duck. So I'll give them the 5 skills, and I should be able to work with a small group with that stuff for about 30 minutes. As far as I'm concerned, then, that gives you enough to not feel out of place in this boxing club. You know how to move in, you know how to move out, you know how to throw a jab, and you know how to get your head out the way of a punch. You'll have to forgive me, my wife, when the dog is going to be barking a lot over the next 20 seconds or so. So, yeah, everything else then is about learning by doing. And one of the things I love about boxing, and one of my big beliefs, is that I can train, for example, a jab, lay back jab, and that is as relevant for an elite level fighter as it is for an absolute novice. So you learn these little patterns in the gym. I don't believe in tying together big long combinations. I always use the Shakespeare principle of, Shakespeare wrote very long plays, but he didn't use very long words. He used very syllables, a horse, rhythm. There was lots of rhythm in his writing. A horse, my kingdom for a horse. So I like to see people build combinations by putting 1 or 2 punches together with a defense. So you might have 2 defense, 1 defense, 2. So you've got a 5-punch combination, but a 8 skill sequence. And you can break that sequence down into individual skills, but you incorporate defensive actions along the way. And it's all about them being in the gym then and learning by doing, right? Because all I can do is explain something to a boxer. then they have to do, and I can talk about the risk profile of stuff that we do. So if you're a front foot fighter, boxing is, for me, is very much geared towards the defender. Like everything else, it's easier to defend than it is to attack. Attack, even in military terms, if you're going to attack someone, you need 3 times as many soldiers as the defender has. That's the general sort of principle. And the same is true in boxing. There's more risk involved in attack than there is in defense. So you explain all of these concepts, the risk profile and how to manage them, and you try and create an environment where these boxers can learn some sequences, some ideas. You can give them tips to go and look at this boxer. If you want to understand this, look at this boxer. Usyk. If you want to understand mobility for heavyweights, look at Usyk. Lomachenko's another one. If you want to understand ring tactics and ring smarts, look at Terence Crawford. Look at how he's relaxed. But they have to learn by doing, and that can be, if they're non-competitive boxers, so if it's just people who are keeping fit, you have to do it on the bags. You can maybe have a little spar with your pals and work out how it works. But if you're a competitor, you have to compete. You have to fight. You have to spar. And a spar is not a fight. You have to fight. You have to follow that through and do all of that work. So that's why I think it's a gradual process, and a time should never be put on it. Because I've had kids who on Monday look absolutely useless, and the following Monday they kind of go over this invisible threshold where you're like, wow, look at that kid, look how different he is. There's a tipping point where then they just are able to learn, execute. So yeah, it's and a lot of it is down to, if I was only working with 3 boxers, I may change my coaching style, but I'm not. I'm working with a team of, in the early class, 20 kids who know nothing, and in the later class, 30, 40 kids who all have different levels. So I have to find ways of engaging with 20 boxers at once. But the one thing I can guarantee, the videos that I put on YouTube are drawn directly from my learning and coaching in the boxing club. So I'm always learning as a coach, as you know this, you've been involved in learning this stuff for a long time. I'm continually learning all of the time through me doing coaching. It took me 2 years to stop being a boxer and start being a coach. And I say this to people now, just because you've boxed doesn't mean you're going to be a good coach, because you've got to explain concepts and take the emotion out of it almost. And some really good coaches I've worked with have never boxed in their life, but they're still able to grasp concepts and explain. So that 2-year period when I finished, where I just wanted to jump in the ring and say, that's not how you do it, this is how you do it. Actually, now I'm totally detached, and I can watch, and I can get them back to the corner, and I can say, do this one thing, or avoid doing that one thing, and I can get that principle across. So yeah, that's a very, very long and meandering answer but there's probably a bit of philosophy in there about my philosophy as a coach, and some people might, whether that's I don't think it's right, I don't think it's wrong. It's how I do it. If we all did it the same, then we'd be robot boxing, wouldn't we?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I think it's a terrific answer. I like when you give long answers, because we're kind of probing this trying to get a deeper level into what you do and how you do. And that's the purpose of me not just interviewing the guy in the corner here who just, the gym looks brand new and there's no experience there. We're trying to pull your experience out to share with people who I would never be able to meet you, because I'm not near Liverpool. I've been to London many times, and Warwick and different places, but I've never gone to Liverpool, so we wouldn't have run into each other. Yeah. So for me, this opportunity is wonderful. So I'm correct me if I'm wrong, and fill in if I've missed. When you talk about the learning process in boxing, we see that it's all learning by doing. it's learning by following a coach, right? So you coach them in the basic moves to start, then they do it. But then there's the learning by observation that you mentioned earlier of watching
Yeah,
the other guys in the club. And then later when you're serious, you're watching other fighters on TV or in the ring, in their competitions and the greats and the Olympians. And your whole thing is observe, do, get corrected by the coach and directed by the coach.
100%. That's a really incisive way of describing what I've just talked about. Yeah, and I love drills. I love footwork drills in front of a mirror on drill patterns. I love partner drills. I love to see, and we will have themes, and that theme may have been driven from something I saw, a couple of days before on maybe a YouTube video or an old, like something last week I was just taught. I stumbled across an Eddie Futch video. I just love Eddie Futch. I just found the man absolutely mesmerising, a brilliant, brilliant coach. And just a little thing where he talked about the importance of lateral movement. And I ran a spar last night in the gym where I was testing the boxers to think about their lateral movement. And that was kind of my focus last week because Eddie said last week. That was my focus last night because Eddie said last week. Eddie said this on you. So that for me is a again, we are back to learn. One of the lovely things I did last night. We've got a brand new coach, Eddie, who's never boxed, but he did the first part of his coaching course at the weekend, so he's very enthusiastic. And I love bringing on new coaches as well. So we've got 2 rings in our boxing club, and I was running the spar in one ring, and Eddie was running the spar in the other ring, and we were changing the boxers over, and I'm sort of pushing him to take on the communication, run the class. What do you think? We'll have a look at that kid over there. What you observe about his stance? So maybe last night a couple of the new kids were leaning too far over their front leg, and again this subtlety of weight distribution between the rear leg, central, and the front leg. It's a very subtle distinction. If you got a kid who's leaning too far forward, all they're doing is giving all of their body weight to the incoming punch. So it's just helping a new coach, evolve on his journey, and that's another really lovely part of being in a boxing club. Again, that really helps me, I believe, produce good videos that help me explain concepts to people who might be in the Midwest, who might be 50 miles away from a boxing club, but who have some space in their basement or in their garage, and they can set up a little learning area, and they can transform their life through learning a skill alongside getting fit, back on the positive flywheel. The skills underpin the fitness, underpin the skills, underpin the fitness, and so it's a really nice place to operate in, that world of boxing club and online, helping people all over the world. It's a really rewarding aspect of my life, to be honest.
You made a very good statement that I wholeheartedly agree with, that just because you were a boxer didn't mean you knew how to coach boxing. It took you 2 years to transition. And a lot of people think in martial arts too, like you get a black belt or whatever level and you go out and open a school or start teaching. But teaching is a different skill. It's a completely different skill than the doing, right? And the fact that you are actually you actually have a class or a course for coaches on how to coach, how to teach, right? So how to coach. And that's very important, because a lot of people, I think in martial arts, boxing, etc., they learn the skills from a teacher and then they think they can go out and teach or coach. But it's a whole different practice, a different mindset, a different thinking.
100% it is, yeah. I mean, about the only thing I feel, because look, I want any boxers I coach to be a whole lot better than I was. We talked earlier, I didn't never consider myself particularly gifted. I was a hard worker. About the only thing I can empathise with is the nerves and the challenge and the emotions before a fight. So I can empathise with that. All of the other stuff, the technical stuff, the tactical stuff, I believe by being around boxers as a coach and watching and learning from them and understanding what impact your instruction has, all of that other stuff can be learned, and you can execute to a really good level without the fact of ever being a competitor. And sometimes those who've been a competitor, because let's face facts here, guys or ladies who fought, they're not drinking violets. They're people who are very sure of themselves. And I think there's an aspect here of, I might be wrong on this. You've got to get to that point where you can adjust your thinking, because actually I've been coaching that in that way, and this is a better way of doing it. And so you don't become emotionally attached to the way you've been doing things just because you don't want to be wrong, or ego gets in the way of anything. I think you have to keep that stuff in absolute check, because that inhibits growth. That inhibits you from growing as a coach and as a person and as a mentor, because a lot of the time as well you're mentoring those around you.
You are indeed. One of the hardest things, and you've now said this maybe 3 or 4 times, that this idea of non-attachment, don't being attached, emotionally or principally to things that are happening, and that fighting with our own ego, that allowing our own ego to subside so that we can grow ourselves, but change our program, our process, and how we coach is a huge thing. It's very hard for human beings to overcome that. And I think being in boxing is one of the great ways to overcome it, because you're getting beat down, right?
Yeah.
You're getting beat up, and you don't win all the time. So, as a competitor or in the development of the skills, and so I think it's like it teaches humility along the way. There's going to be another fighter's going to beat you. You're not going to be as fast as you were in 2 years as you were today. You don't win all the time, and yeah.
Absolutely. I think, one of my great heroes, Marvin Hagler, he always said, someone asked him, what was your best attribute as a fighter? And he just immediately, versatility. And I think in order to be versatile and not put yourself in a category, as one of the massive frustrations I have is, oh no, I'm short and powerful, so I'm going to fight peekaboo. And I kind of think to myself, or whatever style it might be, I just think, look, it's skills that win out. So I think having the ultimate outcome of being versatile, I think a major contributor to that is the act of being humble and being willing to change and try new things and recognize that, God, if I stand and trade with this opponent, I'm going to get absolutely vaporized here. I need to shift and move, and you don't. So one of the spars I ran last night, one of our kids is 10 kilos heavier than the other kid, and of course I put them in the ring together. But the 10-kilo kid knows it's never would is he to throw any worthwhile punches. He's to put a bit of pressure on. But that's as much to teach the young kid, the lighter kid, to say, oh, this guy's so much stronger than you. Why on earth would you be stupid enough to try and hold your ground and push him back? Wake up. And if that was the lateral movement, that was the Eddie Futch lateral movement. Think about moving off to the side. Deflect the strength of the incoming opponent. So yeah, that humility is a massive part, I think, of building a really versatile style. And if we all aim to, Marvin did all right, didn't he, with his versatility?
Yeah, he did. That's why he was marvelous.
That's why he was marvelous. Yeah, it's just a beautiful sort of style to watch. And so yeah, you want humility in a boxing club, and I think it's a good attribute to have in life anyway, as an individual.
Yeah. And when the students can learn it from the coach, can see it in the coach, it goes a long way. Like you said, you're a mentor as well, and
Mhm.
the mentors are, heroes to the kids, role models for the kids,
Yeah.
and they aspire to be like that. So we need to show by example those things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, actions, behaviours and actions, Mark. Yeah, 100. You're absolutely right. Anyone can talk. You know, that old adage, you can talk a good fight, but
Yeah.
actually, we lead by actions, we lead by behaviours, which is why I'll always say please and thank you, which is why I try and not swear when I'm in the boxing club. Sometimes and it's never swear out of anger, it's just,
Yeah.
sometimes it slips out, but I don't particularly like it if it hurts you, but I won't make a big deal out of it, don't get me wrong. But, looking after each other, the kid who's 10 kilograms heavier than me, the other kid, look after him, challenge him or her. And this is what I love. There's something else that's about, I think I don't hear enough in boxing is the role of women in boxing now. So we have female boxers, and I've come to realise that boxing is certainly for me, when it comes to female participation, is the most egalitarian sport I can think of. And the reason I say that, I never want to see a day where a female fighter competes against a male fighter. However, our male and female fighters train together, they suffer together, they spar together, they they compete on the same night together, so they compete on the same show. This is not like the separation of men's soccer and women's soccer, or men's golf and women's golf, or men's tennis and women's tennis. Our kids suffer together. They go through the same training. They work alongside each other. There is an absolute level. We all treat each other the same and have the same level of respect. And it's something that's occurred to me in recent months, because during our refurbishment, see, our boxing club was built without any female changing facilities. Why would they? When those guys built that boxing club in 1976, if I'd have said, yeah, we're going to have women boxing, they looked at me like I just fell out of the sky, It's just, but now we've got it, and I've said I want the best female changing facilities in Liverpool. So we are kitting that female changing room out to be absolutely amazing, wonderful, because it's what they deserve, because they walk through that door in what remains a male dominated environment, but we will go that extra step to help them fit in and help them quickly become part of the team, and they suffer the same as everyone else, and they ask no quarter and they give no quarter, and that's what we need. And it's that egalitarian sort of environment. It's wonderful. It's actually one of the things I'm really proud of boxing for, is the way we now have a level of female boxing that I think is a really good standard. Mm-hmm. But the male and female boxers are so interlinked and so and are on their journey together. The fact that they're not punching each other in a competitive environment, i.e. with venom, I'm relieved about that. However, every other aspect, I'm extremely proud of where boxing has got to on that level, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to talk a little bit about boxing style, because when you're teaching, there's the 61, techniques.
Yeah.
Right. And
61
then
component skills. Call them component skills. Yeah.
And when you're talking about your 5-punch combination that was made up of 8 skill sequence, I love that kind of thinking and thought process. But so there's a basic framework for boxing. These are the basic skills. Here's how you're going to combine these skills. Here are tactics that you want to learn, right, to apply those skills. But then there's the actual doing of the boxing, and that is where the science becomes the art.
Yes.
Because, right, because every person has a different makeup, a different mindset, a different character. So somebody likes to box with their hand low, the other guy's covering up the whole time.
Uh-huh.
Somebody likes, little Ray Leonard,
Yep.
showmanship. But they all seem to somehow be effective in some way, you
Yep.
know? Because I would think, look, keep your hands up so you don't get hit. Hit, bob weave, hit again. But, this guy's down here goofing around and not getting hit, and he's hitting the other guy. So talk a little bit about how that personality and that style comes into play, but it still keeps the core principles and tactics of boxing. But there's that freedom of expression there.
There is. There is. And it's really interesting because you've got the timeless argument about where should coaching stop. Okay.
Right.
So
Okay.
let's just take the low lead hand. So there was a recent fight over here between Joe Joyce and Jing Wei, is it the huge Chinese guy? And Joyce stepped in and got absolutely bingoed with a left hook, put asleep. And people say, "Oh God, what were the tactics there?" And I said, "It wasn't about tactics. It was the fact that Joyce walked in with his lead hand by his waist and went into mid-range and kept his head still. So he wasn't thinking about mobility. He wasn't thinking about any defensive component. It was just a dreadful mistake. He got it badly wrong. So those people who like to box with their hands down, they will still deploy lots of defensive components of either footwork and body movement. So they've still got one eye on defense. If it's my boxer, I still will be a bag of nerves. So I will be like, oh, I really don't want you doing this. But if it's something that they're doing and they want to express themselves, and as long as they learn when to do it and when they can get away with it. So Floyd Mayweather is always someone I use. People talk about him having his hand down. And again, his boxing stance, he actually used to have his weight on his front leg a lot, which makes him quite an offensive fighter. People don't really realise that about him. People always talk, oh, he ran. He did. Mayweather never ran. Quite whether he's the greatest fighter of all time, as he likes to say, that's another conversation. However, probably the most gifted and effective fighter of his generation, without question. Fought all kinds. But whilst his hands are down, and he talks about the Philly shell again, we could talk about that. But again, the old school of George Benton guys would talk at the shoulder roll, and which are all valid defences and head off the centre line and everything. But you make no bones about it, when Mayweather was under genuine threat, bump, them hands came up, So there is definitely a freedom of expression. There is definitely some mistakes you will only make once. And, it's recognising the difference between a boxing style element where you are trying to manage the risk in a sensible way, and you're doing that with a fighter's brain, and separating that from just plain bad decision making where you walk into mid-range with your lead hand down and you get absolutely bingoed, and that is all she wrote. So yeah, I mean, I always like to see the hands up, but if our boxers want to play around with other styles, I always stop myself from saying, get your hands up. What I will always say is, be careful. You're taking a risk. It's ultimately them in there. It's not me. I'm sat at the side of the ring. I've done my time, Your Honour. I'm sat at the side of the ring waiting to give them a drink and look after them when they come back after the 2-minute round.
So when I'm watching your videos, it looks to me from the angle of the video that you're almost standing sideways.
Yes.
Right? But some boxers stand square.
Yes.
And others are diagonal.
Yes.
How is that is that a tactic, or is that a style that the coach imparts, or is that position side, diagonal, or square? a tactic in applying the art?
Well, you go to any, so you go find the US boxing coaching manual online. You can find it. It's the US amateur boxing system, and they will teach multiple stances. So I generally, because I prize mobility over everything, so I will generally start a boxer off with a bladed stance, balls of the feet, ideally, and that gives them good straight line mobility to do the sort of, some people call it the pendulum step. We've always called it the phased attack, of being able to move in and move out. Amateur boxing, high level of mobility, often wins out. But at the same time, it's perfectly reasonable. I will run classes where we talk about squaring the stance up. So a squared stance has an impact on your ability to be mobile, but it allows you to generate more power in your hooks and uppercuts. So if you get to mid and close range, perfectly reasonable to square the stance. Pick the right time to do it, deliver the shots. I think having a squared stance at long range has more negatives than positives, because again, we're back in the realms for me of you're sacrificing mobility. It's slightly different for 12 rounders, although to be fair, Usyk seems to have ripped up the rule book, because that guy seems to be able to stay on the balls of his feet for 12 rounds and be highly mobile. He really has deployed the amateur boxing style and taken it into the pro ranks, and he still uses it now. I don't. People don't really realise that, or certainly that's my perception.
Right.
So again, we're back to the versatility point. I will teach them different stances, and it's usually the distinction between the square, the sides on, bladed, and squaring up when you need to. And it's fine to do both, and it's good to do both, because there's going to be days where your phased attack is just not as good as the opponent's, and you're going to need to turn. You're going to need to turn into a fighter. And fighters generally will square up and will, get them power shots off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It seems from long range what you're saying is, or what I see is that in long range, if you're squared, you lose your reach.
Yep.
So being in that bladed stance or the diagonal stance or sideways stance, you're getting more of the reach. And when you're closer and you want to do a Ray Leonard 1,000 uppercuts and close hooks, being squared off a little more is better for that.
Yeah, you deliver more power, and you can deliver more power equally across both hands as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's very interesting.
So and the long range. So if you picked up on the inches matter, that sort of and that appreciation of range. I like to think of boxing as 5 ranges. You've got close range, mid range, long range, edge of range, and out of range. If you're out of range, do what you want. Yeah. Edge of range is a massively important aspect of boxing, I think, as boxers then can just drift in and out of range.
I want to talk a little bit about body mechanics, because how do you teach body mechanics to teach the students how to generate the most power from their punches? Because a hook and an uppercut and a jab require different body mechanics, raising, lowering of weight, changing center of gravity. When do you get into that? After, how far after you just teach them a jab, and how do you impart that or get them to develop that skill?
Yeah. So the sequence is get the jab right, and then get the straight backhand working well. So the cross. And I kind of take a view then is once they've learned the mechanics for them two things, because what we're talking about, whenever you throw a lead hand punch, we're talking about a push off the front foot. Whenever you throw a backhand punch, we're talking about a push off the back foot.
Yeah.
And every other punch then are variations of those two things. where it's a push off the foot and there's a rotation. I like to think of it as a center axis going down through the body, out and into the floor, and we rotate around this central axis, where the hips actually go from bladed and they come all the way round. So you've got that motion. And once they've developed that rotational ability to drive weight off the front foot or rear foot and rotate the body accordingly, the hooks follow pretty naturally. The uppercuts are a bit different because then we've got a little bit of, we have to get the, so if we're throwing a backhand uppercut, so for an orthodox or right uppercut, the rear hip has to come round and go up slightly at the end. So there's a slight variation, which is why it can take quite a while with the uppercut, because often boxers who haven't mastered the uppercut will land and the forearm won't be on the perfect vertical. Well, to get the forearm on the perfect vertical requires that hip rotation and then the hip rise at the end of it. Now, once you've got that, it's all about that rotation sort of action. Everything else follows. The same for slips, rolls. The legs do a massive amount of work in boxing. The legs are just incredibly important. They are what drive all the power. People don't, and boxers often, you have to see them with the oversized calf muscles and stuff. It's so people don't realize how heavy on the legs boxing can be. Once you've got that rotation and they're not under rotating, all of the other stuff follows fairly easily then. And once they're executing the skills well, it's all about tactical application, tactical versatility, deploying the right strategy for different opponents, placing the shots, based upon a different shape and size of an opponent. Don't just smash away at the ribs. Pick the perfect location under the ribs or into the heart, or all of these other things then that go beyond that.
Do you prefer that students, I've been in many different boxing gyms, mostly when I was younger, but some of the bags are really dense and heavy and like hard to hit, without being wrapped and having a glove on. And some are kind of have a give. Some feel like they're filled with sand, some feel like fabric, and some feel like concrete. They're so hard.
Yeah.
Is there a different, do you have a preference, and is there a different reason to have the different density of the bag? Is that skills?
Yeah. I would generally, so the distinction I've always kind of thought about is between the maze bag and the rest of the heavy bags. You get a good maze bag, which is the sort of pear-shaped balls that are filled with maize. Again, one of the US's highest exports, I think, maize. If I remember some research I did a long time ago. That's like hitting a brick wall.
Yeah.
And even though if I'm doing a workout, I will only do 1 round out of 4 on a maze bag. So I don't want, especially now that I'm getting a bit older, I don't want to be hitting things like hitting a brick wall repeatedly over and over and over again, because you get joint damage and wear and tear over the years. So I prefer bags to have a little bit of give, but it's still, hand protection is absolutely essential. I've never understood this concept of, you must condition the knuckles or punch the bag without. I just don't. I just can't, that doesn't compute with me.
That does not compute.
No, right. It just doesn't, because I need to see kids with good hand wraps. One thing, I've gone back to the old school bag mitts for myself personally when I do a little workout. Because years and years and years ago, I don't think hand injuries were as prevalent, and I wonder whether people who are using big 14, 16 ounce gloves on the bags, I wonder whether the mitts are actually more, they allow there's some dynamic going on that I can't quite put my finger on, but I'm much more comfortable hitting the bag with bag mitts rather than bigger gloves now. I think you get more of a feel for the punch as well. It's much more up close and personal, if you like.
Yeah.
So bit of softness in the bag. We don't need to be punching brick walls to increase punch power. Certainly not.
What weight heavy bag do you use most often?
I couldn't tell you the weight. There are a few principles. We have heavy duty fixings, chains. We don't have vinyl straps because
Right.
they're just not tough enough to survive life in an amateur boxing club, because they're getting hammered. Always leather, like with gloves. Always use leather gloves. They are just better quality. Always good quality leather bags. Ideally, they're a bit more expensive, but they're much more hard wearing and tough. And yeah, I don't want. The bags would be at the heavier end of the spectrum. I don't want bags swinging around everywhere. It's really interesting actually, because our boxing club, we've just at the weekend changed our bag configuration. Because the boxing club is quite big. I'll do a video maybe, and I'll tag you into a video. I'll do a walk around of where we've gotten up to.
Great.
So originally we've had for 50 years scaffolding up around the middle of the gym, and so we've had about 12 bags up, but there's lots of space around all of them. Now we've compressed everything down, so all 12 bags are in probably about half the space. The rationale being, well, two or threefold really. Number one, it gives us more space in the open gym, and an amateur boxing club, open space is worth its weight in gold, because you can get much more done. You can have tech spar, and you can mass skipping sessions, mass strength and conditioning, all of that. But more than that, it's actually, and we watched the boxers last night, and one of the coaches was a bit reluctant, and my rationale was, look, the reason I want to do this is because if these boxers are working the bag, if they've got too much space, they can back away, and they feel too free. With all kinds of movement going on in their immediate vicinity, other boxers, bag swinging, their kind of senses are being overloaded a little bit. So they're getting lots of inputs whilst they're hitting the heavy bag. Oh, I'm moving here, and oh, there's another guy on the bag there. So they're somewhat on top of each other. But the rationale, I feel, is that once we get them in a boxing ring and they're just dealing with the set of inputs that's coming from that person who stood in front of them, it will help them, because they're more than used to dealing with lots of inputs as they're throwing punches. So we've really compressed the amount of space that our heavy bag system takes up. Much more open space, much more compressed on the heavy bags. It might be total nonsense, but it feels like a good thing to try out.
Well, philosophically, it sounds like a good move, because when you're fighting in the ring, until you get that single point of focus, you're hearing the crowds, the coaches.
Yeah, that's another good point.
A lot of input. And when you're in the street, if there's some kind of a group violence or a fight, multiple opponents, you're fighting this guy, but there's a lot of things around you you've got to be aware of. So I think it serves a purpose on a lot of levels. It's actually a really good idea.
We'll see. I do want to do a gym walk around. Yeah, we'll see. I want to do a gym walk around, because we've made some massive progress. It's been a building site for probably the last 3 years, certainly pre-pandemic. Well, we started the build after the pandemic, after the lockdowns and stuff, but it's dragged on massively, and but now we've actually got a properly functioning boxing club, but we've still got some bits and bobs to do, and that's fine. Yeah. We'll sort it out.
Before we close out, I just want to talk about the community outreach piece of your gym, and what you do as the person running this gym. Is that, from what I understand, you're helping kids eat who are hungry. You're helping kids with homework. Is this part of what you're doing there? That it's a kind of a safe haven for these kids in the neighborhood?
So what I'd like to do, so Merseyside Police came to us a couple of years ago, and they gave us £50,000 to build a extension on the gym, because they were very smart. They basically said, look, Fran, by the time we start arresting some of these kids, for many of them it's a bit too late then. So we want you to intervene nice and early so that these kids have somewhere to be and a part of a group, and we can maybe stop the problem before it becomes a problem. Part of that, because I have a day job like everyone else, I have to pay the bills, and this is all voluntary on top of that. But what like to do every summer, we're getting a brand new kitchen installed, lots of new stuff. What I'd like to do is sort of 3 days every summer, do an all boxing day, say from 9:30 in the morning till 2:30 in the afternoon, where we can do some learning of boxing, we can watch some boxing videos, we can break for lunch and we can do some cooking and teaching classes. We can talk about the importance of, if you're an athlete, it doesn't matter what the activity is, you try and do the best you can do. So it doesn't matter if you don't like schoolwork. You've still got to do the best you can do, because that's who you are, and that's non-negotiable. Always try and do the best you can do in whatever you do, whether it's cooking a meal for the family, always try and make it the very best it can be. So it's that psychology, that mindset of teaching these young people to try and achieve in every little thing that they do, every aspect they take on. Just do your best, and no one can ever ask more of you. If you've just put everything in and you tried your hardest, who can ask more? It's never been. I certainly can't as a coach. If I see a kid who's pushed themselves, I can ask no more, and never would I. I'll give them a pat on the back and say, we'll get it next time. As you said earlier in the chat, Sugar Ray Leonard once said, I'm not known to be a hard puncher, I'm known to be a consistent puncher. If the first one doesn't get you, the next one will. And I just like that, again, as a little philosophy. The next one we'll get the next one.
Well, that's a great notion, great philosophy, great way to help kids. And I like the idea of that a group came to your gym because you're doing really great things and saying, you know what, let's invest in this and let's be preventative. Let's force these kids early on. Let's prevent them going astray in a year or 2 or 3 and landing in the wrong group, and now they're in our jails.
100%. Yeah, because they'll be that £50,000 will be the best money ever invested. Because how much does it cost to investigate a crime or keep someone in jail? It's a no-brainer. If there's people like me and my other coach colleagues willing to go in 3 nights a week and do this, because that's the tough thing. It's not building a building. That's piss easy. That's an easy thing to do. Building a building. It's that's nothing. Running that building and creating a special place. Now that's hard, and that needs people, and that needs attention, and that needs commitment, and that needs care and consideration for others and empathy and all of those things. That stuff you can't buy. You can buy flooring and bags and gloves and all of that stuff, but you can't buy people who are there to make a difference.
Well, they need Fran Sands.
Well,
the world needs Fran Sands, the compassionate boxing coach. That's
well. Listen, I am by no means unique. I can promise you that, Mark. I could take you from here now and take you to 5 boxing clubs within 3 miles of this house.
Within 3 miles.
Yeah, and every one of them boxing clubs are staffed with people like me doing the type of thing I do. Not the YouTube stuff, but the running the boxing club stuff. It's just a given. So I once made the mistake of saying I'm not special, and a mate corrected me and said, "No, you are special, but you're not unique." I'm not unique. I think the work we do is special work. We all know that, but it's work that we're willing to do, and I think we get as much from it as the youngsters do who we spend time with.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for spending so much of your time this evening with us. And we know it's getting cold up there in the northwest of England. It's getting cold here.
It certainly is. Us Northern Hemisphere folk are just entering that difficult time of the year, and it's getting dark now. So what time is it now? It's 4:30 p.m. and it's getting dark now. And I'm gonna break and cook that meal for my lovely wife and my daughter.
Have some tea.
Yeah, that's the one, mate. Have some tea. Warwick, for people who don't know, Warwick has possibly the finest castle the world has ever seen.
I love Warwick Castle.
Amazing. Yeah. And anyone who gets the chance to visit that place, do. It's amazing.
Those figures of the people in the statue, in the statue figures of the people in the castle look so real.
Yeah, amazing.
I actually sat there staring, thinking they were people just, holding. Like, you can see skin and veins. It's amazing.
It's incredible waxworks. Yeah, a wonderful place. So we've just done the Warwickshire Tourism Board a little favour there on our.
There you go.
On our
Maybe
chat.
they can donate £10,000 to the gym.
Fingers crossed. Mark, listen, it's been absolutely amazing. I've really enjoyed our chat, and maybe we can do it again one day. And I'm really grateful for you. It was a wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Fran.
Take care, mate. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.